So let me use this one as the starting point, which is the continuation of the slide shown yesterday by Eduardo Zapata, who is the member of the steering group of ALICE. And the thing is that in ALICE, what we are doing now is to prepare research and innovation roadmaps that will be discussed with the European Commission and that will assist the European Commission to define the next topics in the calls from 2016 on. So what we expect with this presentation or this session is to do or to discuss a little bit what should be the vision and scope of the information systems for interconnected logistics group, and also to think on the challenges and gaps that are not covered yet and what needs to be done. It's not only a matter of what to do, but also how to measure this. So for us, it would be also very important to know how do you think we could measure the success or not of the projects and so on. So now I think Georgia, who is with me moderating this session, will present a little bit on the more elaborated questions that we would like you to address.
So good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, actually. This is the last session. So from now we're here is representing the wind project that is going to verify the project, creating the roadmap for achieving innovation in logistics through the ACE platform. And I'm representing the wind project, which does some similar work in trying to achieve the new ways of creating innovation, innovative applications in logistics. But we're not speaking here as projects, we're speaking as people, but we want to create some discussions. So I will start this question. I will share with you questions, and then we will ask our panelists to answer, and then of course you to give us your input. So one question is innovation logistics, how we will achieve it. I will miss this, I will not present this, because I try to explain innovation with asking Greek terms, which shows that in fact we speak about something new and about the achievement of intersections. And in fact what we are looking for achieving innovation in logistics is efficient overlapping of interconnected relations. So we need to identify the drivers for each one of these pillars and see how we can create these synergies. And we heard a lot also, Mr. Koev said that we have not achieved a lot of innovation in Europe in general, and logistics definitely is an issue. So we need to see how this knowledge of time can be achieved. And then I came with the idea that probably we need to create an innovation chain in order to support the logistics sales to act in a very competitive and very, let's say, competitive at the level of global environment way. And one thing is to stimulate demand for innovation in logistics within Europe. And there are many ways to do this, and some of these ways can be included in the programs and programs and actions that we perform in the United States. This type of demands for innovation that comes in Europe. Probably the carbon footprint initiative was one that created people to run for innovative solutions to achieve it. Then, of course, we need to foster more innovative and entrepreneurial culture through knowledge and innovation communities that we need to create. Then we need to look what ICTs do, because they are working in this sector. So sometimes we are bothering in logistics about solving problems that very easily ICT could give the answers, and we give our resources to organize organize these things, and there were many, at least two very good presentations during this CCDA conference which made me thought about this. Of course, we need to ask the people that are doing ICT, the focus of research projects, also depending through entrepreneurial culture on it. We need to combine resources for private, public, and academia, reduce gaps. We need to find some seed investment for new patterns. We say that the projects should conclude the products, and then when the project concludes the products, those that they have the intellectual rights for that, they have to face with cost of patents and value of death until entering in the real market. We also need to see how we will create European innovative approach, taking into account what is the needs of innovation in different areas of Europe. And the cluster discussion that was made this morning before gave me the idea that indeed we need to start from particularities and dynamics along the corridors in different geographies and build upon this for innovation. So some questions to the panelists and to everybody. Do we are lacking ICT development for achieving innovation logistics? Then how ICT could become a driver for changing business models and practices? I can see ICT moving practices to new things, but I don't see how ICT could achieve to change business models, and there is a gap we need to solve. What would make industry to invest in the research projects? And what the industry could see this as an outcome of research product, as a research outcome as a product. We need to identify that, because sometimes when we create our proposals, we say 1, 2, 3, 5 products, exploitation plan, and this kind of thing. So what exactly should be there described? And finally, how we will achieve all this, and what Fernando says that in the context of the next programming period. That's from my side. Thank you.
Okay, so let's first start with the panelists. First of all, I would like to apologize because Eduardo Zapata could not make it today. He needed to address something in Madrid, and he could not join our session, as well as Paolo Paganelli, who is not joining. So then, during yesterday, I arranged some additional interventions of 3 different people that I think were not here in this part of in this table, but I also expected from them to have a comment or a speech on this. So, but let's start first here. Maybe we can start with Stefano Persi. Stefano is working in the WIN project, and he's co-chairing the working group on information systems for interconnected logistics. So, Stefano.
Okay, so I would like to comment two things mainly. One, we've seen in these days, as usual in the CDL, we've been talking about the future, especially I'm thinking now because I had some discussion with the companies and some questions that they raised to me. I've seen thought about what is the ICT, how can we use the ICT, how can we progress the ICT and use it in logistics, as well as companies that focus on their daily business and they use ICT, but they have certain needs. So for the Commission point of view, I would say, obviously we know that Horizon 2020 is trying to get closer to the market, and I think there will still be progress in the ICT, like making the best use of clouds, progressing on the technology, and then use it in the market. But what is the focus of ALICE, and between ALICE the ICT work group, is first of all try to use the minimum amount of ICT that the business is ready to take to use in still be a process and group that try to make the further step in the ICT for the next, with a wider audience, let's say. And Alice is, because it's led mainly by industry, so the leader of the ICT work group is Kuren Adam. And in the steering committee, you can see that industry has a priority. What the industry know very well is we need to simplify the amount of technology and really bring the technology they need. If they need commerce technology, okay, but first of all, understanding the problem. So when you also was talking about innovation, I like the definition. Innovation makes me think, first of all, to a company like Apple and their success. What they bring is a product to the market. And there were already mobile phones before Apple. They didn't invent the mobile. But they look what was maybe the problem with the current mobile phone, and they make it better. So it's understanding where the problem and use the technology as a solution. And it's the priority for us as people.
Okay, thank you, Stefano, for this first intervention. So now, Andreas, could you please illustrate us?
Yeah. Are we addressing all the questions mentioned now?
Yes, you was.
Okay. It's I don't think we are lacking ICT developments. I think we have a lot of things happening which in the industry, and we cannot pick up all news and make developers out of them. We have to be very selective. What would make industry invest? It's traditionally said, oh, if you have an ROE of an investment, then it will be done. That's not our experience. We are a middle-class software company, and we experience with our customers, even though they are suffering from the economic pressure, that they are not really pursuing innovations. And we have the feeling that they must have heard before they really take the step. And what is interesting is that for many companies, and even for large companies, if you show a development or improvement and demonstrate that it's profitable, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will change. It doesn't necessarily mean that they will adapt that. They will have to be forced. There will have to be a new law or some kind of pressure before they will actually do it. And they will find many reasons why it's not necessary to pick up a development. We talked in the last session, we talked about optimizations that bring money, but it's our experience that only a pressure in terms of law really makes it possible, unless very strong forces in the industry drive the process. A good example, maybe I think definitely is the iPhone, which revolutionized the industry and which triggered the development of Android, which then again took a larger market share. Another example is the development of the CD, which could have been 10 years later had not Sony and Philips had taken up the idea. And these are examples that something must happen for technology to happen. It just doesn't happen for itself. And the normal transportation company, whether it's overseas or whether it's in trucks, they are not really adopting innovations on this end.
So, just to clarify, so you think that although you demonstrate that something, that new technology is profitable for the company, that's not enough. Okay, so I think it's an interesting remark. I think not all of you would be agree with that. Let's see. Okay, so let's move to Margarita. Margarita is coordinating the login project, who is establishing logistics arena in which all the stakeholders in the supply chain can share in the web with us their best practices and so on. And I think they're doing good effort on that, but now we will have the opportunity to her.
logistic public. About the question, so I have a strong background in ICT, and I think that ICT is a weird thing that you always want more because it allows you to progress towards innovation and do the things that you usually do better, faster, and in a more efficient way. Although in logistics, I think that we need a more innovative use of technology. And I think that we need, especially right now, to make use of the new things, like I think Georgia quoted before the use of cloud computing or the use of web, and make available all those instruments in an easy way for the final user. I like to quote something that Mr. Ortiz told this morning, and he talked about networking and globalization. So those are the threats we are facing right now, and there is a lot of information, also said this morning, out there, but the data itself is useless because it has, if you take it away from the context, it means almost nothing. So we have this huge amount of data and huge amount of information, and we need some channels to provide this information in a meaningful way to the user. So in this way, ICT, I think, can become a driver, not as a pure product or pure result of research, but in order to allow this sharing of information, so to implement what I like to call a knowledge chain. Because this, in my opinion, is more strategic. And well, about the industry investment, I thought the investor session yesterday was really enlightening in showing some big gaps that needs to be filled, especially from a research project that should not just look at the research in itself, but focusing also whether the research result that the project is trying to achieve have some really meaningful results for the, let's say, the market in the end. So having this market orientation idea in the background, which I don't think it's saying that the research should be tied to the market, but just keep in mind that if you're developing something really important, someone will want to buy it. And yeah, I think that I can stop here for a moment.
Thank you, Marita. And now, finally, finalist of this session, we have James Maha, who is not only organizing this yearly conference, but is also participating and has participated in many EU research projects and has a strong experience in this. So, yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Hannah, for the kind introduction. I think the questions that you both kind of put down there are quite kind of synthesizing what we are actually trying to kind of cage anyway as one of the key issues of the ECITI. I would just like to go through the different questions. So, do we are lacking ICT developments? I don't think so, to be honest, because we have so. I mean, if you look not only to, for example, the funding programs, but also the private investments, there are so many investments. This would be really strange if we are lacking this. On the other hand, if we look, for example, to the success of these investments, then we see only 2% of these which start as a research idea, I would say. Only 2% of these ideas will then actually be real market products. And only, again, from these 2%, again, only a very fraction, around 10%, will be successful in the market. So first of all, we have not only the problem that we have a lot of research, which actually only leads in very few cases into a successful, into a product, and then again, but this product needs to be then also successful in the market, and then there is again the gap of 90%. So from my point of view, this is really one of the major innovation challenges that we have. And I think the second question, how ICT could become a driver for changing business models and practices. My feeling is, for most of the changes that we are seeing, ICT is already the driver. Looking into logistics, for example, I mean, we are operating trucks, we are operating warehouses, hubs, and so on and so forth, but in principle, their function as such hasn't really changed over the last few years, right? I mean, it's still, we are using hubs as hubs and warehouses as warehouses. When we look to the major topic of this conference, I think what we see is that we would like to have a higher transparency, we would like to have better collaboration, and I would say, as long as we are not getting back to drums or something to communicate, is ICT, which we all see as the enabling factor for. So, also looking, I mean, just kind of comparing to the retail sector and looking to Amazon, they are their whole model is based on IT. So I think this is business to consumer, and I think if the consumer is able to catch up with that, the business to business sector will be shortly after that. And so this is the one thing. The other thing is I think the companies are actually trying to make these investments the question is, I mean, what are the indicators which actually could make them ensure that the investments that they are doing will be in the long run actually really improving their business situation? And I mean, there we are talking different standards. I think the RFID story that we had, I think 5 years ago, where we had the big hype that everybody was thinking, yeah, now we are moving towards RFID, and this will be kind of bring the transparency and the visibility into the chain that everybody is demanding. We didn't have this fast take-up, but if you kind of talk to Steve Miles, for example, he can show you some very, very clever and very, very good implementations of RFID in order to improve the transparency. And I think while the hype has been kind of slowed down, we now see a healthy uptake, I would say, of these kind of new technologies. And coming to the fourth question, what the industry considers as a research product, I'm not sure whether research should actually deliver a product as such. I mean, I would have some doubts whether this is really possible, especially since we are looking into how much of these products are actually then finally successful. How we will achieve it in the next program, I think I keep this question for later. Exactly. We can do this at the end.
I'm supposed to give some suggestions.
Okay, so the first interventions of the panelists are ready. Georgia was saying, look, maybe this is something that needs to be done by Alice, and I would like to know who is that Alice. I don't know if it's a person or that Alice are indeed all of us, all the community that we need to define. It's a difficult question, so I think it's smart to say, look, we need somebody else to answer. But I think generally we can reach at least not the best answer, but a useful one. So now I think we can go with Frank. Maybe Frank, who is working in iCargo, he saw the success of the COMSIS project, could illustrate a little bit further on the next step in research and innovation in the field.
Thank you. I hope that this works. I must say the joint conversation. Now I pick up some new ideas, so I'm on the fly thinking you would say. But you asked me first to get some clarification on where I see this common framework development going further. So I'd say first a few words about that, and then after that maybe share a few other ideas. So we had quite some interesting discussions during this week to see where we now stand with the common framework, about its usability, about further work to be done on that. And I think it's a shared observation that, first of all, what we have now is extremely useful in order to establish simple forms of interoperability between systems and services. But there are certainly ways to further develop that and to make it more usable in the future. And one way of development was to look how can you actually make an open data sharing architecture possible without really prescribing very explicitly in which ways you should use specific messages for it. So to actually be a little bit more disorganized, and as a result of that, enable for more ad hoc ways of sharing information. Another aspect, what we certainly experienced in the COMSYS project also, is that using these messages often requires in-depth knowledge on the context within which they are used. And we see that it is a challenge to define more specific contexts or communities or usages where you can use common framework messages or derivatives of that, so that the use is much more understood by the parties involved. Currently, the common framework messages are rather abstract, which is also its power. It's also its limitation. If you use it in a practical situation, then it often is still requiring some analysis and communication between the parties involved to make sure you understand the same with the information that you are exchanging. But I also would like to make a few remarks about this industry interest. I think that if we are able to deliver business services with very clear benefits, that industry will be interested to take up our results. But there are some limitations. There are a huge amount of data in the supply chain, yes there are, but much of that is in silos that is being guarded by industries. And industries are not always that keen on sharing that whole amount of information with everybody, because they are very hesitant to do that. There are strategic interests in it. So what I see ultimately is that we are developing communities, yes, but maybe we should look into communities for much more narrow defined and focused objectives. If you look at the apps that are on these kinds of devices, then you are sharing information with people in the community, but often only for very specific things. And when you share information for very specific objectives, it's much easier for consumers at least to say, well, I'm willing to share because I'm really getting a benefit out of that. And maybe if we translate that to a more professional context, we have the same phenomenon over there. So I think what we should try to look into is not only at grand schemes and the most elaborate architectures, but to create an ecosystem where specific, dedicated purpose communities can be set up, where the added value that industries get from it is very clearly defined, but it's also very clearly defined what they have to offer, what they have to release as information to participate in that. And I think there is a lot of potential in that. That then in the background, all of that makes part of the same, let's say, the reference architecture. So that is, of course, possible. But I see really a lot of possibilities in that area. That's my contribution. So there are more questions on that.
Thank you very much, Frank. I think now maybe tomorrow, maybe it's the turn of Peter, who had a nice idea on how to make, or at least a thought on the future.
I've got about 10 points tonight. I'd like to make them quickly. I a wider perspective than just those questions there. And I'll answer those questions again if you may. The real question is how to improve asset performance. In other words, investors move on trucks and trains, and they are managed by increasingly a cloud overlay that associates with those assets. But my main driver for this discussion is saying that these assets are not sweating up. And I think there's some major issues here. And I was asked by Fernando to give you an analogy, and I refer back to, some of you might have heard of this, the TV change, because I think we're on a cusp of that. The Commission is asking us for looking at new ideas comprehensively that takes us into a new era. And this summarizes it. If you take analog TVs, which have made the change to digital TVs in the last decade, there were some serious changes that had to take place. On the one hand, the old technology devices were proprietary supplies, it was supplier-driven, it was linked to multiplexing, and the user had limited choice of what came onto the screen. The industry went away and decided through new set of protocols and the like that we could have a better supply, and it's called digital TV. So that allowed us to have a consumer-driven, multi-channel, mega multi-channel choice that was driven by now the consumer. And I've got to say to you that I think the chasm that we're on is the change, and we need to look at the infrastructure needed. They looked at their infrastructure needed, they put in the protocols, the bandwidths, the reallocation of bands, wavelength bands, and they came out with a new answer. We're not doing that. On the one hand, we have this cloud overlay that's fine, it's producing wonderful results, but we aren't actually tackling the problem. The problem is actually on the ground, and how we use the inventory is being held up because we're not using the assets. First point. The second point is, if we have the cloud lying over the top, underneath that cloud, we have the shipper who represents the logistics requirement. And then we have the transport means, which is distributed sort of across the landscape and provides a lot of services. Now, I'd say only about 20% of the real cost of them is actually what the shipper does. We might have different procedures and the like, but 80% of the costs are actually what we do with those assets and how the inventory gets them. And then it's tracking them. So the outcome of my little point of view is somebody's got to focus on how we improve those asset usage. And one way of doing this is to look at the definition of what is in a link between hubs. Because that's what the truck or the train has to, take the goods across. And I've come up with a term many years ago, it's called RPS. It's called revenue per space, or revenue per slot. If you take a gauge of Russian railways, European railways, German railways, or truck cycles, or frequency of conveyance, we're not maximizing simple questions that don't get answered like this. We're not even using those adequately. And I'd say, concentrating on the cloud, it's not where we as an industry have to be. We have to be making sure that the assets and the inventories move downside faster because consumers want that to be so. So, when you look at green corridors, we're going to go back and think what a green corridor is. If I asked all of you what a green corridor is, I'd get 1,000 different answers. It's not good enough. We need to know what a green corridor is. When I say green corridor, I mean every link in the network. The next thing, this leads us on to what is the unitization we're looking for? The unitization, I believe, is in what is an IMU. We've got two types of IMU. We've got a container IMU, we've got a center IMU. Well, they're sort of in an odd way based on, I say power performance in a sense. But they're not fully optimized. And do they get to all sources and seeds? No. So I think we've all got to scratch our heads and say, if we're going to have common carrier services, which I think is the way that the networks are going to pan out in the future, we've got to have something that we know what the unit is that's going to go across the board. We don't. And I don't think we're going to live in CEN and ISO standards as they are. And and there needs to be a lot of discussion. And I'd like the whole market to wake up and start talking about it. At the moment, we're there's a thing called H1, H2, H3 horizons. If you know anything, I can't fully explain now. H1 is the existing topology. And most of our research goes back in incremental terms and piggybacks on the existing unsustainable topology. The Commission keeps asking us, saying, what is the new way of doing it? Nobody's coming up with it. We need to do it. Having a disruptive output isn't helpful, but it does say there's a better way of doing something, and some said in previous H1. I would say that we need to start thinking clearly about where the H3 transformational viewpoint is. I'd like people to talk about it. The issue is that if you get elephants in the room that in fact can only see so far and then everything gets a bit hazy, you've got a real problem. So I'd say we've got to have clear water between the transformational requirements and what we're churning today. We can't have people who want to drag us back into today. We want to do that what tomorrow is. And then it comes down to education. I don't think there's enough education. People think about their coal face and their tools and what they want to do, but they do not know what the other 360 degrees are doing. So when you talk about anything that wants to be coordinated, you get a sort of dumb answer. So I think education is the key to all of this, and we want the same page, because we're not on the same page.
Okay, Peter, let's...
I've just got two things.
Okay.
I'm trying to get the next generation of mobile systems and software thing going. And if you'd like to talk about it, that would be great. Some of the components and definitions of it, it's not much more. So, by the time we get to Dortmund next year, I want to make sure this discussion has gone further, because it's vital. We can't afford to sit on our laurels doing nothing. Last point is going to ask those questions. I think the ICT is not the driver. Moving of goods overall is the driver. We need to define item 2, we need to define the process. ICT is not the driver, it's a supporting issue. It helps us manage what we're trying to do. Therefore, the process comes first. Answer 3, we need to make more efficient and cost-effective solutions, both in asset reduction, inventory reduction, and speeding up the flows. Can't answer 4, because I don't think that's a relevant question. 5, I think we need a new paradigm. We need to have deadlines that are not serial, in other words, you have to wait for one answer to get somewhere else. We need to have them in parallel, and that needs management. And managing parallel developments is kind of the framework of what you're trying to achieve. So it all comes back to education, has to be on the same page. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Peter, for the long extended discussion and number of points.
I've been very grateful.
At the end of the session, I will try to summarize it, but I am going to miss a lot of things. But thank you very much, because I think the point on the asset performance. Okay. Okay.
Andre Nijhuis from DHL. What I sincerely missed here is the word customer. I think it's very inward looking at these questions, like how does ICT become the driver for changes in business models? At the end, it is the customer. It has to be the question from the customer that needs to drive the changes, that requires that they want new processes. And the RFID is this kind of example. We can develop something, but if there is no customer there, we can forget about it. I was very surprised with 2% of projects that actually are getting to the right response. Possibly that is because you didn't start at the right place, asking first for the different customers what they really want. If I look at the changes that we see within DHL and within lots and lots of logistic service providers, most of our projects are going well. We would be dead on the ground if only 2% would actually succeed. Why? Because it is the customers that actually ask these questions and we develop those. And there was a question, also an answer there, that IT was indeed doing lots of good things in the business because transport, etc., remained the same over the many years. and it was ICT that has driven it. Well, I don't think so. Very often it is the customer that actually asks things, then we change something, and it actually works. And in all honesty, we are working with several customers that really requested some things of us that are going to provide changes to, or needs to provide changes to the IT environment. That is really what will create a success. So I'm not quite sure why are you thinking that ICT should be the driver. It's the customer. If you look at the iPhone, the customer wants iPhones. It's not like Apple has to create something out of the blue. No, you have to look at the customer. Now, I didn't hear the word customer. In all honesty, in our company, we would have closed this meeting 15 minutes ago because the word customer wasn't even there. It's really interesting that you are so inward looking from the perspective. So that's what I want to do. I mean, as a customer. And indeed, I also see so little customers or where you have these opportunities. And where Frank, for example, is working with DHL and the other areas, there he has an example, what he explained earlier. There was a need from a customer, then you get a positive result.
Okay, so first I Stefano and Jörgen would like to answer, and Margarita, but we still need to, because, okay, let's go. Okay. Stefano?
So, starting like from the last point that you mentioned, the case of the iPhone that I mentioned before. I made that example on laptop because I think it's one case where the customer very much in the beginning. So that's why we are targeting. Like if you see Alice, the industry, they also place in is in Alice. And when I say Alice, it is a steering committee, and the whole recruiting process, like all the company can participate in Alice. Maybe then we can make but that's the idea.
By the way, DHL is in Alice.
Yes, exactly. DHL. So this is like, it is not that we forgot this. I would not mix maybe the project that we're seeing in these days, that are no under Alice responsibility at all. That's the big approach that, it was the classical FP6, FP7 approach, and the research was on the top of the innovation. And sometimes it was difficult to involve maybe the company because it was too much research oriented and not need of the customers. And what we try to do now, running a project we just started, and we're not much technical presentation because we started a month ago, but we have like full introduction with the customers, with the company. In our case, the benefit is for the SMEs. What we are looking is for the benefit across the whole supply chain to see who should pay for it. Because we try to favor the SMEs, doesn't mean we are small to the SMEs to start with the consideration. So we need to look to the whole supply chain to see who benefit and how to fix the business model, to set a business model on this relation. So I think that question to me was a bit provocative, also knowing Georgia, I'm sure she did that on purpose. I think that the ICT should not drive the business model. I think the business model as much as important as ICT or more. I think close interaction of what you're trying to achieve and what you use should be what drive you to your business model. So the whole idea that mentioned the Apple is let's start thinking more as a company, developing a product, a solution, and not just as a research entity. That was my consideration. I think Alice is in this line.
So, I'm reading the voice of login in this layer. Probably nobody mentioned specifically customers or users, which is a bit broader class. But specifically to the second question, ICT could become a driver for business model practice. Actually, what we address in login and in the logistics arena, which is Rosanna, is that those three dimensions I think interlinked, because if there are no, let's say, technological enhancement, the business model would not enhance and the practice either. So those are really interlinked, and the research or the application research should address all these three dimensions homogenously and harmoniously. process of innovation and the process that might be behind the iPhone. The customer didn't ask for an iPhone. The customer maybe asked not to have many devices, but there was a visionary of the creative man like Steve Jobs that put together the fact that maybe I want to use a single device to listen to the music and to look, surf on the internet and to assess my email and maybe also to make some money. So there was a visionary man that put together the needs that were bubbling up from the users. And it came up with this innovative idea. The idea is not customer driven. The customer expresses some needs, and I bet you in DHL do the same. Because the customer really, the past saying, bring me this parcel from here to there. Then you add on all the services because you grasp the needs of your customer. No?
No, absolutely not. No. We make our innovations by customers really coming with innovative ideas and not so basic as you think. Absolutely not. It's not.
Okay, if I can also say something. I don't know whether you can consider the question provocative or not, but definitely it did good work in order, since we are discussing so interesting on this topic. None of these questions exclude the fact that the major driving forces is the customer requirement. Actually, how it was announced, this, let's say, discussion, this session, and what we are trying to identify in order to feed the new programs, and is exactly what could be the role of ICT. And then I like very much your last statement after Margarita's comment. You said that you are driving your innovation because your customers are asking for new things, okay? That brings me to this idea that we proposed at the beginning, that probably we need to support this innovation chain. And starting by raising, the first step that I suggested was raising the demand for innovation, which goes to our customers mainly. And in order to raise this, we can also think of policies and of incentives, not only looking on what solutions regarding practices, what agreements regarding business models, and what ICT we need in order to find a solution, to give a business service which is valuable for everybody. That was from my side, the clarification.
Thank you, Gabriel. Let's go with Steve Mines, who is also willing to have an insight.
So actually, I'd like to pick up on this theme, and if we go back to the beginning of the conference, where the two first speakers on the panel, both myself and the gentleman from Gartner, were looking at this overall question of ICT and logistics in the context of what's important and what's happening in the world, right? So one of the things that the Gartner analysts said that companies, actual customers were interested in was end-to-end visibility, right? And it turns out that logistics, or ICT, is really just a part of delivering a product or a service to a customer. So one of the challenges and opportunities has been to say, how do we take data from the logistics supply chain and how do we integrate this in the larger process? And in the use case of the pharmaceutical industry, I described specifically, so there's a VP of supply chain for a biologics company who is now a VP of operations. And he said, you know what? I don't just have to worry about the product getting from here to there now. I have to worry about its quality. And my goodness, in the new paradigm of healthcare in the United States, it actually, I have to care about whether it works or not. Nobody asked me, it wasn't part of my job when I was supply chain to figure out whether the product did any good, right? Whereas now that's actually part of the incredible customer value equation that I'm being asked to deliver. If that's the case, I think I heard at the beginning, we said, well, how are we doing on ICT? So it's important to recognize, over the course of the last 2 days, there have been tremendous advances in ICT and supply chain logistics, starting with the navigation systems that we now all have that's available from the smallest SME, to the shipping containers, right? So we better are able to track the conditions of things than we ever could before. series throughout the course of these last several days, that if I'm a customer and I want to ship a product from A to B, and there's this transmodal requirement where we really like to find the most economically efficient and environmentally efficient ways to ship. So I like to compare, do I ship it by sea, by train, or by road, that information isn't available to me. And if we ask the big data question, we say, so how much data, whether from DHL, from in any of the projects that we work on, how much logistics data is published in an API so that an independent developer can take that data and make use of it on the web and add some value to it? So weather data is available, right? There's lots of data that governments and shippers have, but unless I've misunderstood something, at least from what I can understand in Europe, there is no data at the shipment level today. By contrast, for example, in Singapore, we have a project at MIT where every ship, every train, every bus, every taxi, every metro, that level of data is coming on the platform. But even there, up at the container level, as logistics providers, as a logistics industry, we haven't surfaced that data in any meaningful way on the web. And so to turn this around into a constructive suggestion, so we heard about an e-freight ontology that a group has developed that would allow us to publish information in some consistent way so that that data could be consumed and used by application providers or service providers or customers to figure out, the best way to use and leverage the logistics infrastructure that so many people have so much experience on in the room. So I would suggest that actually ICT developments are key, are critical, and getting data in some consumable form out there and beginning to use it to address some of the overriding issues that have come up over the last couple of days could perhaps be a useful thing.
Okay, thank you. I think Frank wanted to intervene as well. And we have here another one.
Well, I think that users know very well what they want. But we also see from the Garden presentation and others that this knowledge is quite commonly shared. So it is quite known what is asked for. But I would like to quote a famous Dutch guy who has made a profession of playing football, Johan Cruyff. He always said the secret of the game is in the details. And that means that what we are lacking, I believe, is we have this general idea that we need to address, user requirements, but when we then start to develop and push into technology, we are doing that in a cocoon. And especially new projects, I'm sorry to say so, I have been part of that for many years also. We often create a comfort zone of linking in users, but not really putting them into the driving seat. And until you are obliged to deliver an innovation that is really usable by a user, you can very freely play a game and all kinds of nice experiments and so on. And the borderline between something which is really usable and which is total rubbish is rather thin. So I think that we as a EU community, we have to learn that in order to develop things that are really usable, we need to put users for the details in the driver's seat. Otherwise, we indeed end up that only 2% of it is being used.
Thank you. Sorry about my voice. My name is. Excuse me. Okay, maybe. Okay, I'm sorry about the croaking. My name is Monica Lynch, and I'm from the Maritime College in Ireland. Thank you. Okay, so I would like to make a suggestion to help put SMEs into the driving seat of the uptake of ICT in logistics and make a proposal for starting the logistics innovation chain. George wants to talk about it. So this is only a start of a suggestion. In the new call for Horizon 2020, a technology or product readiness scale has been proposed. I think the scale is 1 to 10, something like that, where at the start of the scale, a product idea is number 1, and at number 10 is a product in the market generating revenue. What we need to do is we need to propose ideas in projects in the next round for 2020 that state up front their technology readiness at the point of the proposal. Once the proposal gets funded, sometime later, maybe 1 year, we need to review and say what status that idea is at, and we need to track the development of these products throughout the project. We also need to widen the definition of product. Here we need to say that it's not just a product. Maybe we need to say something like change or outcome impact. And then we need to track those along this innovation readiness as well. So if it is a sharing of information, or if it is a publication, if it is a new conference, if it is whatever dissemination ideas that we put forward, we can also track these using the maturity scale. And I think that a really nice idea for certain SMEs is the fact that generally these projects tend to create products that maybe 3, 4, 5 on this readiness scale. So we need to fast track certain SMEs who are interested in making products in the marketplace. So one of my suggestions would be through this logistics innovation chain to actually potentially assist SMEs to access this €50,000 bursary, 100% funded, that is also available in Horizon 2020. Potentially, we'll see. Also, another idea that I have for your suggestion, Stephen, is if we get some companies in, they should give us a certain amount of data up front for particular business cases, and then we should publish that information, publish it straight away, start a project, and run a competition, where the competition is open to whomever you suggest. And that competition potentially will result in the kinds of small innovations such as that one with the military that you suggested, I can't remember. So publish the data up front and early and run a competition and give a prize. And there you will have a very, very demonstrable product to market within months. That's my suggestion for logistics innovation chains to start. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, can I just add to that? I think I like the idea. She said where it starts. I think actually over the duration of the project is where it's likely to get to down on the scale. In other words, does it to 8 or 6 or 5? Because then you can actually see what the expectations are, what the project's trying to produce at its outcome. When it finishes, that's good. A bit more.
I would like to actually, I think this was a very, very important contribution that you made. I think you're from DHL, right? Why are we not focusing on the customer? I think if we are talking about collaborative systems to some extent, we have a multitude of customers, especially if we are talking, for example, about platform. And the problem is, if we are drilling down that, I'm pretty sure that we find controversial interests to some extent. We are talking about warehouses, forwarders, and LSPs, for example. So from my point of view, I mean, it's a very valid point. And the problem is also, I think that we need to have all these stakeholders discuss with each other, yeah, we would like to do it this and this way. I think there will be a lot of different interest because some of the business models that are now there, that are quite successful in the market, will prevent certain solutions, innovation to happen. And I think this is, from that point of view, I'm very grateful that you made this point because you are right. I mean, we are not really talking about because what is really needed, right? Because we are thinking about kind of very often about a bright future where everybody is working closely together and everything will be kind of painted in ink. But the reality, unfortunately, looks a little bit different, right? And I think one of the major problems that we are encountering, especially with the projects where we are really trying hard to kind of bring together the collaboration, bring together the horizontal collaboration, trying to improve utilization, they actually kind of fail at the reality that we are sometimes not recognizing, and where we hope at least that this will be changing in the long run. So I think this is also relevant to, let's say, a lot of the panelists that we have. So, I mean, they have to, especially if we are talking about small and medium enterprise, they have to live now. They don't care what kind of nice visions we have for the next 3 years. They have to live in this reality now. And from that point of view, I think it's also a very important question also to raise, for example, for an activity like Alice. What is the value proposition for the members in the long run? Maybe you can answer.
Because I was at the same time trying to prepare the conclusion, so I was not really on that. So no, then I need that to repeat the question and the long run issue with the. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying what we need to have is a clear value proposition. I mean, for all everybody who's kind of will cooperate in the LS platform. What are we actually offering, and how do we solve inherent kind of conflict of interest that we will find with the different stakeholders or customers?
The added value of Alice in the long run should be, first of all, I think it's clear that we cannot afford that only 2% of the projects, research projects, are successful. So, in the long run, we should achieve this to be at least 10 times better. This is the one thing. Second thing, I think it's also a way to, this is what you mentioned, is in one of the deliverables on the need of Alice, because what we have seen in the past is that not many customers, not many industry has been involved in these projects. And it's clear that this is something that is needed to be changed. And that's the reason, because Alice was established. Regarding the conflict of interest, Alice is not doing any project itself. Alice is trying to bring the real problems, the real issues, and identify and define the challenges. Alice is not going to do the projects. The projects are going to be done by the different proposers who wants to address this challenge and who can make it better. So the responsibility of Alice is to define those challenges, to know what's not going well, and to change it, and to accelerate that change that I think is needed. So I think this is the more you don't have any. We are very in advance of the lunchtime. That I would suggest to finish earlier, because yesterday I had a bad experience. Finish it later. So, any further comment? Okay, I would like to make make a summary? Maybe you also want to do some less remark? Okay, I can. Okay. So I'm starting, and you're already finished. So part of the things I wanted to talk about were already in my previous intervention. I think in this regard, I'm going more further. I think Alice is more focused on new solutions rather than new technologies. And something that we are seeing is that there's still a gap on the price, and not on the price of the technology, but on the setup cost for a certain technology to be implemented in the current systems. That is preventing SMEs and small companies to go further. So I think it's still needed to make a further step to make SMEs be in a position that they can invest in that, because they make an investment that is enough for dealing with more of their customers, I would say. And I think Margarita mentioned as well that globalization is a threat, but it's always also an opportunity, and that many different things that are happening could be a source of further innovation, like cloud computing, which is something that is still maybe it's developed at the ICT part, but not at the solutions part. Social network, big data, and all that. I think it's important on the transparency and visibility, but sometimes it's a little bit tricky to show all your information. Of course, you cannot do that. But Frank said, look, maybe we need to focus on the information I need to improve as a certain process, which is maybe the details are making the difference. And I think that's a good statement as well. Frank also mentioned the importance of having an information architecture or infrastructure, but then looking into the details on how to make use of this for the specific processes, which I think is also interesting. You mentioned education as a main and important issue, as well as, okay, we have an opportunity to improve assets performance, and information and asset performance is something that is linked. And let's go with the following. I think Georgia mentioned something that is also important, and it's making this discussion so interesting, and it's how to improve and pave the innovation chain. So how to make this going from the 2% to the 20%, and that's not easy. I think I started working in knowledge transfer 10 years ago, and it was the first question I heard, and it's still there. And that's all on my side. Sorry, because I think I have 3 different pages with notes, and now it's not possible for me to address everything. So I'm sorry if I leave something, but it's in my notes, and we will make some conclusions on this. Okay, thank you very much on my side. Now,
Okay. The role of the good moderator is to provoke. So I think I succeeded with these questions. So I would
Indeed, sorry for interrupting. Indeed, you were asked to do that.
Okay, thank you, Fernando. He's not.
I didn't ask. Somebody more important than me.
Yeah, so Fernando made a very good conclusion, and kind one, referring to all of those that have mentioned participated in this, was really valuable input. Allow me to follow these questions in order to make my sum. So whether we are lacking ICT development or not, I believe the answer is that not really, but what we need is an innovative way of using the technologies. And also, I have realized also with this question of studying the application to provide making small use of data. What we are looking here is to create business services. That's for the first time from these years that I'm involved in research projects, I see that the audience says that we don't need just the top-down approach. So we organize a frame, we say that is, we should do that. And I'm really happy to hear this. But we also justify the bottom-up approach. So we have to go, in order to have business services that the industry will use, this innovation will be adopted. So you have to go in the detail, you have to go by near side with the requirements. And of course, you need some tools in order to, let's say, publish the data and give the opportunity to others to use out of your work. And that is really good and justify works that have been done in many projects up to now. Now, there was also the question about the ICT being the driver. Of course, the driver, the first seat, the driver is waiting for innovation. It's the customer. He is asking what he wants to have, and ICT, I understand all of us, we agree that it can be an enabler, but probably there is an issue there on how we'll achieve these changes. Okay, research and innovative results of research are not sometimes very successful. It takes time. But also it was being confirmed by the industry that it takes time for them also to make the steps. And as Jens said, it's not only one customer, it's many customers. And how we achieve this collaboration? So these issues are issues of priority in the next work of research, and I think we need also new typology of projects and new typology of consortia in order to achieve it. So technology provides, there was one here, there was a question, should I develop anything or should I get one of the well-known companies having applications and then customize it, looking to the details and looking also to what the big industrial partners already use, so you make adoption easier. So all these things could give us ideas of formulating successful projects and having a better let's say, ratio of success. And I would recall also that we need also indicators for assessing how the things can move towards changes. Because no industrial party will invest on nothing if it's not well known from the beginning what will be the impact and how it will go. What would make it invest? I think my last sentence probably give an answer there. We didn't receive a lot of input for this question. What the Institute considers a research project, we received an answer. This is quite a relevant question, and I'm not answering to this. But also, I believe it's an issue that was a very nice comment that, in fact, research projects should not deliver products. We have to look again at what we are declaring this exploitation class of the new project. So probably contribution from this stakeholders platform at least could be on how we will define successful research outcomes and what should be the expectations of research programs on that. So probably research would not feel guilty if all of the outcomes of the project that don't go directly to the market. Let's relax ourselves as researchers and be working in the project. And then finally, how we will achieve it in the next program? No many ideas, but I would like to invite you at least to the idea to keep with you what Fernando said and follow what Alice is going to do and what the two projects we are contributing and keep contributing and approach us and send emails and contribute to this process. It's a long process and probably will be successful. Thank you very much from my side also. Thank you.